Ever feel like everyone's giving you the same retirement advice? Save more, spend less, invest in your 401k, and that's it? Well, here's the truth. That advice can actually hurt your retirement if it's not built around you. Most retirement plans are one size fits all, but your goals, your health, your family, that's unique to you. That cookie cutter plan is not designed to protect your lifestyle or your peace of mind. In this video, I'll show you how to build a retirement plan that's as unique as you are. So you never run out of money, feel stuck with your healthcare choices, or wondering if you're doing retirement right. So let's start with the big three. First and foremost is your income plan. Your money where it's at determines when and how we should take the money out. If all the money is in your 401k, for example, then we have different risk than if your money is inside of a real estate project, than if the money is inside of your own personal business. If the money is inside of your 401k, we've deducted taxes today, which can be very beneficial as far as lowering taxes today. But later in retirement, we expect to pay ordinary income taxes. And ordinary income is generally going to be one of the higher forms of taxable income. So we need to be thinking about how much money we need to have since a larger portion is going to be kept in taxes. We also have to consider whether we have required minimum distributions. When you have required minimum distributions, all that means is a very fancy way of saying Uncle Sam is going to require you to take out some money, maybe if you don't even need to take it out. That number gets larger and larger as we get older and older. That could possibly push us into a higher tax bracket. That could possibly have us taking out money that we just would not have used that way. And it really can put us at a disadvantage later in retirement when maybe we're done with the traveling and we're done with the adventures and we just kind of want to relax in our neighborhood, locally hang out with our friends and do things around town, or maybe want to volunteer, which doesn't really take that much of our income either. Another consideration for your income plan is generally just how much do you need. People are normally told that they need to have 80% of their income set aside, and that's how much they should need in retirement. Well, the thought is if you're saving 20% of your income for retirement, then that ultimately means that you've been living off of 80% of your income anyways. So if we're retired, then we don't have to put any more money towards our retirement plan, which means we just need 80% of our income. Now, some of the benefits of this is naturally it already takes your cost of living into consideration. I know how much things cost in my current lifestyle. So if I'm going to stay in the same house in the same city and sort of eat the same food, then I'm pretty okay with the idea of saying I only need 80% of my income. The issue becomes if you plan on moving. What if you move to a lower cost of living state or country? What if you move to a higher cost of living state or country? What if your overall retirement lifestyle, which we'll get into a little bit later, is actually a lot higher than what it currently is? What if you don't travel as much right now, but you plan on traveling a lot more later? What if it's the opposite? What if your work and your lifestyle and your travel, it's so much hustle and bustle that you're moving a million miles an hour that when you retire, you think you want to relax a little bit. And you actually were thinking about sitting on the back porch, reading a good book and watching the sunset, doing things that are relatively cheap, like going to the beach or walking at the park and different things like that. Well, in that case, you might not actually even need 8% of your income. That is why when you're talking about someone's income plan, it's not just about us putting money in a 401k, because depending on your taxable income, whether you have extra income, we really could do a lot better than just a 401k. Keep in mind, the money inside your 401k, you can't touch it till 59 and a half. There's no guaranteed returns, and everything taken out is retired as ordinary income. And then when you look at what our government is doing, there is a real possibility that we're currently at the lowest taxes are going to be in a very long time. That for the past, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 years, every president has been lowering taxes, and now we're going to have over $40 trillion of debt. Many are saying that in the future, we're probably going to have to increase some taxes. Even if you look at things like the dependency ratio, which I won't bore you with all the details, it just keeps track of how much of your population as a percentage is working and paying taxes and how much of your population is not working. They're either too old to work, so they're dependent on the government services, or they're too young to work. In the same idea, they're dependent on the government services. If you have too high of a dependency ratio, that generally leads to countries either having to do a lot of immigration because they don't have enough people working to generate the taxable revenue, or they end up increasing the taxes on the smaller percentage of people working. If you look at from a variety of different ways, the future does not seem that the government is going to be able to maintain its lower taxes without the possibility of having to make a drastic change in the way the economy works. So if you're putting all your money in your 401k, you can't touch it, which now limits your ability to invest in your own business, to invest in real estate, where you can build these other streams of income. because it's going to be taxed and it's going to be penalized if you touch it before 59 and a half. That is why you hear me often saying that the numbers show that 65% of self-made millionaires have at least three streams of income. And those income are normally going to be tied in three asset classes. Your real estate, and so you're investing in properties. Number two is your own business. So you're investing in yourself and your own entrepreneurial endeavors. And then number three is going to be the stock market, which normally gives us access to multiple streams of income because we have everything from businesses to real estate to interest income to royalty income, depending on the businesses we invest in. And so we normally will be in one of those three asset classes. And the top 10% of wealth owns 89% of the stock market. So we already know where it makes sense to be able to put your money if you want to grow your money so you can stop working. And you can only put so much inside of a 401k, and you don't have the ability to leverage that money in a way to multiply your income streams later in retirement, which is why for most people, the income plan has to be very unique to you, how long you plan to retire and when you plan to retire. If you want to retire before 59 and a half, then it may not make sense to put all your money inside of a 401k. But if we're someone that is thinking, I really do have a great business idea, that's how I think I'll spend a lot of my retirement interacting, building relationships, challenging myself, always wanted to do this, then we have to design an income plan that matches that desire. Your income plan can also differ when we're talking about Social Security and how to maximize it. Maximizing Social Security has a lot of factors that go into that. The models that I use literally have over 700 scenarios that we run through. And all we're really saying is, what is your life expectancy, whether your healthcare, what streams of income do you have to bridge it if you did want to retire at 60? What do you have to generate income until 70? We're talking about what makes the most sense for you and your spouse as far as coordinating when you take your Social Security out. We're also talking about it from a tax perspective where we don't know if we want to have all these streams activated right before Medicare, because you may find yourself being penalized for having too much income as you were getting ready for retirement, because normally they have a look back period. We're talking about Medicare. So Social Security has a lot of moving pieces, a lot of levers. Man, simply telling everyone, hey, wait till 70, I don't know. That doesn't actually work for most people. That it really does depend on a variety of factors. Now, I will say that that doesn't mean everyone should take it out at 62 either, because I've heard that advice all the time too, which is like, hey, I knew someone and they retired at 64 and then they died the next year and they didn't receive any of their Social Security money, right? Stuff like that. You've probably heard the same thing. But we always have to take a step back from an emotional perspective and recognize that, yes, we received a phone call when someone passes early. No, we don't receive a phone call from everyone that we know that's still alive. And I think we both agree that you're going to receive more phone calls from everyone still alive than you would of those that passed. We just don't call to say, hey, I'm alive, everything's good. But we do call to say, hey, something happened to Bob and you need to sit down to hear it. And so it just sticks with us a little bit more. The reality is the majority of people, right? The average life expectancy is normally around the mid 70s. Women tend to live a little bit longer than men. But with that being said, if there's a couple where both of you are 65 years old, that there is a 50% chance that one of the two of you will make it to 90, which I think is pretty cool. And so when you're looking at Social Security, it depends on so many different factors outside of just saying, well, it gets an 8% increase every single year, so just wait till 70. It's a lot more than that. The last consideration that we'll talk about today when it comes to your income plan is whether you have a pension or not. And I've often used the Florida retirement system to make this point, right? The idea that people say, hey, look, if you have a pension, then you're good because you're going to have an income stream the rest of your life. So you don't have to worry about doing anything outside of your pension. Or find a nice pension company, you'll be fine, no worries, rainbows and skittles. So people will go work for the government and the military and the police as a teacher. They'll work for the government in the post office. There's so many different ways. And then there are some private sector pensions, but that's normally only going to be under 20%. We don't have as many pensions as we used to, but it's very important to take a look at whether or not your pension has a COLA attached to it, a cost of living adjustment. That if you have a cost of living adjustment, then it is something that you can consider as far as I'll just maintain my pension. I'll make sure I work here and that'll be my retirement plan. But if you're like me in Florida with the Florida retirement system, in 2012, they removed the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, which means that if you were to retire today and your pension was, I don't know, let's say like $5,000 a month, that's like 60,000 a year. You're like, all right, good. I feel really good about my retirement income. But because there's a 3% inflation hit every single year, ultimately means that in 20 years that you would need double what you need today. So what was a $60,000 lifestyle today would be a $120,000 lifestyle in 20 years. And you would need to have some form of income to increase with that. Otherwise, you can only live half of your lifestyle later in retirement. We also, when normally are talking about pensions, it's normally a good idea just to consider whether or not you have generational wealth desires. A lot of times what we're saying is, hey, you have a pension, you have an income stream for life. But if you want to leave something, if you had generational wealth goals, then having the money inside of an investment plan and possibly taking a portion of that, that you then purchase your own annuity or your own pension. That's what an annuity is, a personal pension. And then you take the other portion. And what I'll say is, I'm going to allow this portion to keep growing. I'm going to invest in the stock market. I'm going to invest in real estate. I'm going to invest in a business. And so you have the income stream that you could add a cost of living adjustment to. You have the ability to customize it in a way that you don't have when you're talking about a pension through your employer. Your employer makes all of the decision. It's also probably worth considering, not as common, but it is worth considering. Your pension is tied to the fact that you believe that company is going to be around for the life of your retirement. That if you invest in a company and you work there for 20 years and that is your pension and that company files for bankruptcy, then that pension is gone. It's going to be settled like any other claim to a creditor, which is basically saying you go to court, they look at how much money is there, and then they give you a percentage of the money. So maybe every dollar you get 65 cents. Right? That may be the settlement in a bankruptcy court. And then they'll give you whatever that amount is, and that's the end of it. And so that is also something to consider just when we're talking about a pension. And the final consideration for your income plan is naturally what your withdrawal strategy is going to be. That if you do the 4% withdrawal strategy, well, that can work for some, but it may not work for everyone. If you end up doing the three bucket strategy, that is my personal favorite, but I also recognize that that may not work for everyone either. And so there really are a variety of withdrawal strategies that have to be considered for your unique situation, where your money is, how it's invested, and your risk appetite, and how much your lifestyle is, and things like that. Because we have to consider it from a tax perspective, not only your lifestyle perspective, and we have to decide what makes the most sense. Should I have an income-based withdrawal strategy where I have dividend income, real estate income, and pension income, and so I just live off my income streams and I never touch any of my principals? Or does it make more sense for me to have the three bucket strategy where I have a portion that's cash liquid, and that's normally 1 to 2 years? I normally have a portion that is income based, and that's my moderate bucket. That's normally going to be 3 to 9 years. And then have my 10 plus years, and that's my aggressive growth bucket. It depends on so many different factors to determine what the best withdrawal strategy is for you. And we haven't even considered it from a tax perspective if you're a high income earner and you just want to keep more of your money. And so there are so many ways that we can put a withdrawal strategy together. And there are the ones that are a little bit simpler and the ones that are a little bit more difficult, but it depends a lot on what your goals are and where your money is currently located. That leads us into number two, which is your healthcare plan. And so your healthcare is easily one of the most underrated parts of retirement planning, that we just tell everyone, hey, look, when you're 65, get Medicare, sign up for that. You have the 3 months before, 3 months after the month of your birthday. So that's like the 7 month window. And then people are normally pushed into one of the most common Medigap plans. And then that's it. That's what the advice ends up being. But your healthcare, there's a lot of moving pieces as well as everything else. And when it comes to retirement planning, I'm big on flexibility, just you having the choice to decide what makes the most sense for you. And so when you're talking about healthcare plan, do you want to have dental and vision? Because that would be Medicare Part C or Medicare Advantage. And then if we got that, do we then need to have a Medigap plan? Generally speaking, no. But if you're someone who's more worried about your coinsurance and your deductibles and your out-of-pocket expenses because you plan on going to the doctor a little bit more regularly than maybe someone else who doesn't plan on going to the doctor more regularly, then you may be someone that focuses on the Medigap plans because they put caps on those coinsurances and those out-of-pockets to where it makes them a little bit more manageable, where you're not taking as much of the risk. But you then have to decide, well, I then have to make a monthly payment. But for some people, they're fine with that because they're like, "Look, I've been making monthly healthcare payments from my paychecks for years, my entire working career. So what's the big deal about having to do that in retirement?" Well, others like the idea of having little to no monthly payments, and then they manage it themselves. They're like, look, I'm fine. I don't plan on going to the doctor a lot. I am okay with the traditional Medicare Part A and B, and then I'll get the Medicare Part D for the prescription drug benefit, and then that'll be it. And if that was the plan that worked for you, then you would have a much lower monthly payment but it does, of course, depend on your income. And then you can see the tables and they go through that where it says, hey, if you make this amount, then this is what you can expect to pay each month. If you make this amount, it goes up and then it continues to go up for that. And they also have penalties tied to when you enroll in Medicare, and they're lifetime penalties, which is a very fancy way of saying that if you miss that window that we just mentioned, the 3 months before, 3 months after, in the month of your birthday, that 7 month window to enroll in Medicare, outside of having those exceptions where you're still working and some things like that, you will then have a penalty. So it could be $15 a month higher. It could be $25 a month higher. But that extra amount is for the rest of your retirement life. So whatever your Medicare payment would have been, you add that 20 bucks onto it and you pay that extra $20 every single month the rest of your life. And so it's important to make sure that you don't miss that window. Now, that is something that we can have a general discussion on, where I think everybody should try to make sure they make the window, or they understand that they qualify for the exception, which normally is going to be if I'm still working and my employer qualifies in a certain way, the healthcare plan qualifies. Normally it's things like 20 employees, but I won't go into a lot of it, but you just want to look, see if the work that you're doing qualifies as an exception. And if it does, then you're fine. If it doesn't, even if you're still working, you'll need to enroll in Medicare if you don't want to have to pay that extra penalty. Two less discussed aspects of healthcare planning is going to be the use of a health savings account and whether or not you have to get long-term care coverage in some way, shape, or form. A lot of times we talk about Medicare, and then that's where the conversation begins and ends. But when you look at the fact that 7 out of 10 people 65 and older will have at least one long-term care episode, when you look at the fact that long-term care, whether you're going to have home health aid, someone comes to your house and helps you, whether you're going to go to an assisted living facility where maybe you drive there and they help you physical therapy and different things, or whether you need full-blown assistance and you end up having to go to a nursing home for a certain amount of time, that is going to be unique for each individual person. Some people are okay going to a nursing home and the community and the friendship and things like that. Some people only want the person to visit them inside of their house. Some people have family that live by them and have said, I will help you, don't worry about it. And some people are single and they don't have any kids and they have to figure out who's going to take care of them when they can't take care of themselves. These are real conversations that we have to have. And a lot of times we don't talk a lot about long-term care and the different choices that you have. On average, it ends up being about $50,000 a year. And on average, it's about 3 years. And that basically means that long-term care is going to be $150,000 to $250,000 over the life of your retirement. Right? We're not saying it's 3 years straight, but we're saying it may be 6 months here, a year there. Then I have to decide, how am I going to fund that? Am I going to get long-term care insurance? And that will help me. I pay the premium and then they cover it. And they have them designed in so many ways. And they're very nice as far as the structure. You do, of course, need to make sure you're choosing an insurance company that you believe will be around for the life of your retirement. Or am I going to self-fund? I'm going to put the money aside. I'm going to let it grow in the same way that I may put money for a grandkid to help them with college, the same way I may put money aside for my trips, maybe the same way I'll put money aside to buy a new vehicle is the same way that I put money aside for long-term care. And I have that money sitting there in case something happens. It's also important to consider your healthcare from an HSA account, your health savings account. What ends up happening is those high deductible plans that you have to access a health savings account. We normally have to make a choice. There's a cost with everything. Sometimes what we're saying is, well, I don't want a high deductible plan because I have kids and they're young and we have a lot of expenses. And that's fine. But is there ever a point in time that we can switch to a high deductible health savings account? Because the money goes in tax deductible. So it doesn't count as income today. The money grows tax deferred, which means I don't pay taxes on it every single year. And then the money comes out tax free as long as I spend it on healthcare expenses. Your HSA is a great asset to most, if not all, retirement plans, but it is something that we need to be thinking about a little bit early, and then we have to coordinate our healthcare expenses leading up to it. Otherwise, we have to send the money out before retirement. But if we're able to put a strategy in place, or maybe we have a flex spending account that we can spend on an annual basis, or maybe we're able to just save a certain amount on certain years, but we're able to start working towards having money that pays for healthcare expenses that's tax-free. That's a very nice benefit. We just don't consider things from a tax perspective very much, but I love that a lot. And you don't have to worry about whether or not you will have healthcare expenses in retirement because we all do. And normally the way the numbers work out is it's not impossible for an individual to spend about $200,000 in retirement. That's everything from their Medicare to long-term care to normal healthcare checkups with everything else included, that you can expect to spend about $200,000 as an individual. And it wouldn't be crazy to spend about $400,000 as a couple. So the money that you have inside your health savings account is going to go a long way to helping you pay these healthcare expenses. But it is unique to you. It depends on your lifestyle. Or do you consider yourself very healthy? Do you eat healthy? Do you walk? Do you have longevity in your family where everybody lives to a picture of 50 years old? All these things would be considered inside of my healthcare plan because it's unique to me and my own personal lifestyle. And the reason that this is very important, the reason that I do talk about healthcare probably more than most financial planners do, is because one medical crisis could wipe out someone's retirement plan where you have the money that's set aside, everything's looking rainbows and skittles. And then we have one healthcare crisis that just drains our money for 6 months or a year, and we're spending to pay for these healthcare expenses. And then the retirement is completely changed. The trajectory of our success is completely altered. And so that's just something that a lot of us, we don't really think about because we're healthy. Why would we think about it? But as we get older, it is something that we want to plan for. We want to plan to stay healthy, but we also want to have the protection in case things don't go exactly as we had planned. And so when you're looking at the cost of not having a healthcare plan specific and unique to your own individual need, it can change everything when it comes to retirement. And it can make it a much more stressful experience, and it could definitely cost someone their peace of mind. And a third and final way that retirement can be catered and unique to you, of course, has to do with lifestyle. This is the fun part, and the truth is the most personal part is what brings you joy, fulfillment, and satisfaction. And interesting enough, this is also one of the things that we think about the least in retirement is what I want to do with my time. Most of the time we're focused on the money. Hey, I get my money right. I know I can retire. I'm worried about running out of money. I'm worried about inflation. I'm worried about my healthcare expenses. But we don't think as much about our time. And we do see that oftentimes if we don't know what we're going to do with our time, that we end up saying, I'm just going to go back to work because at least working kind of challenged me in a way that I enjoy more than just sitting around doing nothing. I have all of my time. I'm successfully retired. I have my financial freedom, but I don't know what I want to do with that freedom. And that's a real dilemma. That's a real thing that we're all thinking about where it's like, I have these thoughts of being able to wake up when I want to. Well, sure. Well, what are you going to do once you wake up? Like I have these thoughts of not having to be told what to do. Okay, great. Well, what are you going to tell yourself to do? Who are you going to meet? Where are you going to go? What causes do you want to support? What hobbies do you want to have? Do you want to travel or do you see yourself golfing? Do you want to go fishing or do you see yourself volunteering? All of these things that you want to do in retirement, we want to put together and make a list. And normally I encourage people to have a list of 50 items. And I know everybody thinks I'm crazy, but I'll tell you, I always say 50 because the first 10 things, maybe even the first 20, those are normally going to be the squeaky wheels. I want to pay this off. I want to see this place. I want to do these things. And when you really take a step back at it, you probably could do that in 5 years. Well, what about the rest of your retirement? And so when we have 50 things, what ends up happening is we really start thinking deep because it requires deeper thought. Because most of the time we're just trying to put the fires out, whether we're taking our kids here and we're paying off that bill, we're getting out of debt, we're dealing with this issue at work, all these different things. We have all these fires. And then once you put the fires out with like what's left. And so when it comes to your retirement, your lifestyle, if you start looking at things like 45 to 50 on the list, that's going to be really meaningful things. In my humble opinion, those are going to be the things that you really think back and almost remember in your childhood, things that you're very passionate about that just kind of fell by the wayside when we did this thing we called adulting. And that's why I like for you to really think and have a very long list. But whatever the list is, there's thing you have to promise me is whenever I'm checking off something in my item, I add one more new thing in that item. So whatever the number is, your list should never go below that. Because as we age, as we experience life, of course your goals are going to change. Why wouldn't they change? Everything else is changing around us. Why wouldn't we change too? And so maybe we said, I want to travel. Then we traveled and we're like, that was no fun. Or maybe we're invited to do something and we enjoyed it so much that it became a part of our lifestyle going forward where we need to adjust the plan. I remember I had experienced that personally, right? Like I had a friend that we went to church with and they had one extra ticket to a Spartan race. They're like, hey, Dre, you should come with us. And I was like, okay, sure. And then I went to the Spartan race and it was so much fun. It was so challenging. I enjoyed it so much. And I was like, man, I'm gonna do this with my family. And then we did. The next year, my whole family, we all did a Spartan race. And then we've done multiple races over the years, but that all started from one friend with an extra ticket inviting me. Would I have possibly stumbled into it at some point in time? Yeah, possibly, but maybe not. Maybe I would have lived my whole life and never done a Spartan race. And it can be very interesting how by chance life can feel sometimes. So you want to give your goals and your lifestyle the opportunity to absorb some of those chances and adjust with them. That you do something with a friend that you just met and you're like, man, this is great. Add it to the list. And then we can kind of go from there. But the next thing that we want to do is after we list everything, normally we break it into a timeline. So I would like for us to be able to say, these are the things I'm going to work on for the next 12 months. That's my short-term goals. And then my medium-term goals are things that may take 3 to 5 years. And then everything that's kind of that 10 and over, almost like the three bucket withdrawal strategy. And then everything that's kind of like 10 over, those are my long-term goals. And I will work towards my long-term goals. I will stop procrastinating and take action on my short-term goals. And then I will plan reasonably to accomplish the medium-term goals. Whether that is taking a trip somewhere and I said, okay, I would take that trip in 2 years. Well, I divide how much the trip costs, add inflation by the number of months. Okay, I'm going to put that amount in my account every single month and I'm going to get my ticket. And for those that already have the money set aside, you can purchase the ticket and still plan on going in 2 years, but you have a much lower price because you're taking a decent amount of risk with them, right? When you look at cruises, when you book earlier and further ahead, they're normally lower prices because you've already given the cruise line your money today. And we don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. And because you're taking that risk with them, they say, hey, look, we'll go ahead and give you a lower price. That's saying with airline tickets, hotels, the further out you book, they recognize you're taking some risk. You don't know what the future is going to hold, just like they don't know. But they got your money today. And so they normally give you a lower price. And then that leads you to the third part of your lifestyle planning. First, you have the list. Second, you bucket it out, whether it's going to be short-term, medium-term, or long-term goals. And then the third part is you have to put a price tag next to it. How much does that trip cost? How much does that volunteering cost you? If it costs you anything, to be on the board, sometimes it costs you something. Or you have to donate our time or money. What does that look like? There's places we want to go, concerts, Super Bowls, World Series, all these events. Just see how much it costs. What's the cost of doing these individual things? Add it up and then add it to the retirement plan. Because normally what we do is we just say everybody's going to live on 80% of their income. But the reality is maybe not. Maybe part of your goal is to move to a completely different country. Maybe you want to climb mountains. Maybe you want to travel in all 50 states. I don't know what you want to do with your retirement. I just know that it has a cost associated with it. And we should put what that cost is so we can put a plan together to ensure that your lifestyle matches and you can actually afford to accomplish all of the dreams that you have, all the things that you dream of when you think of retirement. And while the cost is an important consideration as far as lifestyle planning, it's also worth mentioning that if we don't get this part right, it's very hard to enjoy retirement because it is your time that your happiness is tied to how we spend our time, whether we spend it on pleasure or purpose. It's also probably worth mentioning that we should be considering this from a healthcare risk perspective, that the Medicare you choose depends in part on whether you're quote in network or out of network, depending on some of the Medicare Advantage plans. For example, Medicare Advantage, it assumes that your in networks are going to be around your zip code. Well, if you're traveling for large months of the year, then it may not make sense for you to get a Medicare Advantage plan because you won't be around. You'll be paying out of network costs all the time. These are things that we really need to think strongly about because it does impact the money that we need. It impacts the healthcare choices we'll make, and it impacts how we'll feel in retirement. When it comes to having a wealthy retirement, it's about so much more than riches. It's about being able to confidently make those sound decisions that give me the peace of mind of knowing that my retirement is exactly as I dreamed it would be. And you have the plan in place in case it doesn't work out exactly as we dreamed it to be. And that really is the difference between a wish and a plan. And that's the difference between having a plan that is designed with you in mind versus a generic plan that generally works, but it may not work for you and your own unique retirement. Want a tailored plan? I invite you to come to our Worry-Free Wednesdays. It's live every single Wednesday where we go through the 5 hidden dangers to a successful wealthy retirement in 3 frameworks that I use with my personal clients to make sure that you don't have to worry about those in your retirement. Until next time, as always, I'm thankful for our time together. If you found value in this video, I simply ask for you to like and subscribe so you can continue receiving valuable insights on how to create your own wealthy retirement system. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.